Welcome to Salience, the AI podcast on the science of the brain built from curated sources. This is episode 3, Executive Function, the Brain's Missing Manager. This is educational content only, not medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
hmm
So for everyone joining us on this deep dive, I want you to just imagine something for a second. Imagine being able to sit down and hyper-focus for 12 hours straight.
Right.
Like you're building a complex, beautiful website completely from scratch. But then on the flip side, you find it physically impossible to fold a basket of laundry that has been sitting in your bedroom for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, the classic laundry chair. We all know it.
Exactly. And if you look at that from the outside, I mean, it makes zero sense. It looks like laziness or, just
It
stubbornness.
really does.
But today we are looking under the hood of the brain to explore this paradox that affects millions of people. We're demystifying executive function, basically the brain's internal management system.
Yeah, we just so misunderstood.
It is. We're going to explore exactly what it is, why it operates so differently in an ADHD brain, and how this wiring creates these exhausting daily hurdles. And crucially, how these exact same traits secretly fuel some of the most successful entrepreneurial minds in the world.
It's uh, it's a really profound shift in perspective when you stop viewing attention deficit hyperactivity disorder through the lens of like a behavioral problem,
Right.
and you start looking at it purely as a structural difference in how the brain initiates action. Because to understand the unique advantages of the ADHD brain, you have to look really closely at the specific system that is wired differently.
The executive function.
Exactly. Executive function, which is largely housed in the prefrontal cortex, it's essentially, well, it's the CEO of the brain.
Okay, so if it's the CEO, what is its actual job description? Like when a neurotypical brain sits down to, say, pay a bill or start a work project, what is this internal manager physically doing?
So according to Dr. Russell Berkeley, who is really a pioneer in this research executive function, is the cognitive machinery that allows us to direct an action at ourselves,
Direct an action at ourselves.
right? To alter our future behavior. It organizes thoughts, prioritizes tasks, manages time, and regulates emotions. And Berkeley actually maps this out across 4 specific neural circuits.
Okay, let's break those down.
Yeah, because it helps to see how they normally fire together.
Yeah.
So the first is what he calls the what circuit. This is heavily linked to the dorsolateral cortex. Basically, this is your working memory.
So working memory, it's the system that holds information active in your mind to guide what you're doing right now.
Exactly.
So it's basically the brain's RAM. Like it holds the thought, I need to pay the electric bill in active memory while I navigate to the website.
Precisely. It keeps the goal online.
Yeah.
But, knowing what to do isn't enough. You need to know how to sequence it.
Right.
And that involves the second circuit, the when circuit.
Hmm.
This connects the prefrontal area down to the cerebellum at the back of the brain.
The cerebellum, that's for coordination, isn't it?
Yeah, physical coordination and timing.
Mhm.
So in the context of executive function, this circuit acts as your internal metronome. It strings behaviors together in the right chronological order.
Oh, wow. So it helps you accurately estimate how long a task will actually take.
Exactly. So the
Oh.
what holds the goal, the when sequences the physical steps to get there.
I imagine emotion has to play a role here too, right? Especially if a task is like super frustrating.
It plays a massive role. And that's governed by the third one, the why circuit. This connects the frontal lobe down into the amygdala, which is deep in the emotional center of the brain.
The amygdala, the fight or flight center.
Right. So this circuit is the regulator. It links your emotions to your decision making. When you encounter friction like, say, a website crashing while you try to pay that bill,
Oh, the worst.
right, the why circuit modulates your frustration so you don't just, throw your laptop across the room.
Huh.
It keeps your feelings aligned with the long-term goal.
Okay, so that's what, when, why. What's the fourth?
The fourth is the who circuit. This oversees all of it, connecting the frontal lobe to the posterior hemisphere. It's the source of self-awareness.
Like an internal mirror.
Exactly like a mirror. It allows you to monitor your own actions in real time and adjust as you go.
Okay, so trying to picture all of this. Having ADHD is like having a state-of-the-art computer hard drive loaded with files and knowledge. But the operating system that opens, sorts, and executes those files is completely glitchy. The data is there, you just can't click run.
I love that analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And to take that hard drive idea a step further, imagine the power cord connecting the hard drive to the processor as like a frayed wire.
A frayed wire.
Yeah. The intelligence, the skills, the intent, they're all perfectly intact. But the signal to actually initiate the sequence, it just drops out.
Wow.
This is Barclay's central thesis, actually.
Yeah.
And it completely reframes the condition. He says ADHD is an executive disorder, which means it is a performance disorder, not a knowledge disorder.
A performance disorder, meaning the breakdown happens specifically at the point of performance, like the exact moment you are supposed to do the thing you know you should do.
Yes. People with ADHD don't need more instruction. They don't need someone to explain the steps of folding laundry to them.
Right, they know how to fold a shirt.
Exactly. They have the knowledge. What fails is the executive manager's ability to pull the trigger and translate that knowledge into forward physical momentum.
Which honestly raises a major question. If the standard operating system is constantly failing to boot up for these basic tasks, what actually turns this brain on?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because we started by talking about that paradox, right? The inability to fold laundry versus the ability to hyper-focus on a website for 12 hours. What is physically happening differently in the brain during those two scenarios?
So to understand that, we have to look at the neurological battle between two major networks in the brain, the task-causative network, or TPN, and the default mode network, the DMN.
Okay, TPN and DMN.
Right. In a neurotypical brain, these two function like a seesaw. When you need to focus on, say, a dense spreadsheet, the task-positive network activates. That allows for deep immersion.
And the Owen shuts down.
Exactly. As the TPN goes up, the default mode network, which is responsible for daydreaming, internal monologues, mind-wandering, it quiets down. They alternate smoothly.
But I'm guessing in an ADHD brain, that seesaw is broken.
Very broken. Neuroimaging actually shows that in an ADHD brain, these two networks often compete simultaneously. It's a glitchy switch.
So they're both firing at the same time.
Yes, blood flow and electrical activity just don't cleanly transition. So you are trying to read a dense report using your task-positive network, but your default mode network is still blazing away at full volume.
Just generating a loud internal narrative, creative tangents, associative memories, all of that.
Exactly. You are literally fighting your own brain's imaginative capacity just to read a single sentence.
That sounds incredibly draining. I mean, if the brain is actively working against its own focus, standard advice like, you just need to try harder, seems completely unhelpful.
It is entirely unhelpful.
It's not a matter of willpower if the neurological switch literally won't flip. So how does the brain ever achieve that 12-hour hyper-focused state? Like, what provides the spark?
The spark comes from a completely different fuel source.
Yeah.
Dr. William Dodson introduced this framework, and he calls it the interest-based nervous system.
The interest-based nervous system.
Yeah. He points out that most neurotypical brains operate on an importance-based system.
Yeah.
They're driven by personal significance, secondhand importance like a manager telling you something is a priority.
Or just future rewards and consequences, right?
Right. If a task is important, the neurotypical brain recruits enough dopamine to activate the executive functions and just get it done. The ADHD brain, however, does not run on importance.
Wait, it doesn't run on importance. That feels like a radical statement because our entire society, our schools, our workplaces, they're built entirely on the premise of importance.
They absolutely are. But biologically, importance does not trigger the necessary dopamine release in an ADHD brain.
Wow.
Dodson uses the acronym INCUP to describe what actually does trigger it. Interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion.
ENCUP.
I like that. Yeah, the ADHD brain requires one or more of these elements to ignite. If a task is genuinely interesting, deeply novel, or presents a highly urgent crisis, the brain is flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine.
And that's when the switch flips.
Exactly. The glitchy switch finally flips, the default mode network shuts down, and you enter a state of hyperfocus that can actually exceed neurotypical capacity.
Let me push back on this a bit, though. When
Yeah.
someone says, I can't do this important paperwork because I'm just not passionate about it, I mean, to someone who doesn't understand the neurology, that sounds like a massive excuse.
Oh, it constantly sounds like an excuse.
Right. Are we saying the brain physically cannot force itself to care about long-term consequences?
Yes, and it's a neurochemical reality driven by something called delayed discounting.
Delay discounting.
Yeah. In a typical brain, if I tell you that completing a boring task today will result in a big cash bonus in 6 months, your brain releases a small, anticipatory dose of dopamine right now.
Okay, so that anticipatory dopamine sort of bridges the gap. It provides the energy to do the boring thing today.
Exactly. But in the ADHD brain, research shows that the dopamine signal for a future reward decays incredibly fast. The further away the reward, the weaker the chemical signal.
So a reward 6 months away.
Generates zero anticipatory dopamine today. None. The fuel tank is completely empty. The task has to be interesting now or urgent now.
Okay, so what does this mean for everyday life? Because mundane day-to-day existence is practically defined by boring tasks and severely delayed rewards. Doing the dishes doesn't trigger novelty or passion.
It doesn't. And that is precisely why the daily toll of ADHD is so profound. It leads to phenomena like task paralysis.
Task paralysis.
Yeah. To a neurotypical brain, washing the dishes is perceived as one simple, cohesive action. It's just doing the dishes. But remember the wind circuit we discussed earlier?
The sequencing circuit, the internal metronome.
Right. Because that executive function is underpowered, the ADHD brain perceives the dishes not as one task, but as an overwhelming, insurmountable mountain of micro steps.
Like stand up, walk to the sink, find the sponge.
Realize there's no soap, look for the soap, turn the water on, scrub, rinse, dry. It's endless.
And without the dopamine to grease the transition between each of those steps, the brain looks at the sequence and simply freezes.
It refuses to boot up the software for chores.
And if the sequencing circuit is underpowered, what happens to time management? Because we hear about time blindness all the time with ADHD.
Constantly.
But it's not like they literally can't read a calendar. They know a deadline is 2 weeks away. What is physically happening when you say they are blind to it?
It goes back to that emotional and prioritization linkage. The ADHD brain basically perceives time in a binary way. There is now and there is not now.
Just those two.
Just those two. Because of that severe delay discounting we talked about, a deadline 2 weeks away exists entirely in the not now zone. It generates zero neurochemical urgency.
It's functionally invisible to the brain's prioritization engine.
Exactly.
It's just floating in the ether until it suddenly isn't.
Right. It's not until the deadline is literally tomorrow morning that it abruptly crosses the threshold into the now zone. And when it does, the brain recognizes the immediate threat.
And that triggers a panic.
A massive spike of adrenaline and cortisol. That panic finally provides the urgency fuel from our INCUP acronym. The brain is basically using anxiety as a substitute for dopamine to force the executive functions to turn on.
But relying on sheer panic and cortisol to initiate action, I mean, you can't sustain that.
You really can't.
It sounds like driving a manual transmission car in heavy traffic while everyone else is driving an automatic. The neurotypical drivers are just cruising, casually stepping on the gas. But the person with ADHD is doing all this exhausting, hidden manual shifting.
Yeah, dumping the clutch, over-revving the engine just to keep from stalling out in the middle of the road.
Exactly.
And that invisible manual shifting is exactly what leads to ADHD burnout. It is a profound neurological exhaustion. People with ADHD spend a massive amount of cognitive energy just trying to camouflage their deficits.
Just to function in an importance-based world.
Right. And there's actually a 2024 study on masking behaviors that found adults with ADHD report incredibly high rates of day-to-day masking.
What does that masking look like in practice?
It means they overprepare. They obsessively double-check everything to compensate for their working memory failures. They actively suppress their hyperactivity to appear professional in meetings.
And they continuously manufacture that anxiety to force sustained attention.
Yes. And eventually, the transmission just runs out completely.
So, if relying on willpower, internal management, and manufactured anxiety inevitably leads to a breakdown, what is the sustainable solution? If your internal CEO is fundamentally glitchy, how do you manage your life?
The paradigm shift here is to stop trying to fix the internal manager. You have to fire it, essentially, and outsource the job.
Outsource it.
Yeah. You build what Dr. Barkley calls a prosthetic environment. You literally externalize your executive functions into your physical surroundings and your technology.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that, because traditional self-help advice completely misses the mark here. Everyone reads a book like, Atomic Habits and thinks, I just need to build a routine.
Oh, the habit trap.
Right. Why does the standard model of habit building fail for this specific neurological profile?
Well, books like Atomic Habits are brilliant for neurotypical brains because neurotypical habits rely on a robust dopamine anticipation loop.
The anticipation loop.
Right. When you repeat an action over and over, the brain learns to anticipate the reward. Eventually, that anticipation provides the dopamine needed to execute the task automatically on autopilot.
But because the ADHD reward circuitry is disrupted,
That anticipation loop doesn't form reliably.
so the habit never actually crystallizes into an automatic background process. You still have to manually start the engine with the exact same amount of effort on day 100 as you did on day 1.
Exactly. Relying on an internal habit is relying on the very executive function that is impaired. So instead, Barkley advises externalizing the function right at the point of performance.
Okay, give me an example.
If your working memory is weak, do not try to hold information in your head. Put it in your physical visual field. Sticky notes on the mirror. If your internal metronome is weak, make time physical and visible with, like, analog visual timers.
Our sources highlight some fascinating tech tools that are specifically designed to act as these external prosthetics. One that really stands out to me is an app called Goblin Tools, which directly targets that task paralysis we talked about with the dishes.
Goblet Tools is a perfect example of externalizing the when circuit, the sequencing manager.
Right.
It basically uses AI to break down overwhelming tasks into highly granular microsteps. If your brain freezes at the thought of cleaning the kitchen, you just type that into the app.
And it generates an actionable list, like open the dishwasher, pick up one plate, put the plate in the rack, wipe one section of the counter.
Exactly. It performs the cognitive labor of sequencing for you. It removes the friction that causes the paralysis in the first place.
It's literally an administrative assistant living in your phone. Another approach is tackling the transition between waking up and starting the day, which is notoriously hard when you have zero baseline dopamine. The sources mention Alarmy and another one called Freaky Alarm.
Oh yeah, these apps create extreme wake-up friction.
Wake up friction.
Yeah, they bypass the automatic low consciousness habit of just hitting snooze. They demand a physical and cognitive mission to turn the noise off.
Like what? What do you have to do?
You might have to physically walk into the bathroom and scan the barcode on your shampoo bottle, or solve 3 math problems.
Oh, wow.
It forcefully pulls the brain into the now zone by requiring physical movement, which stimulates the whole nervous system.
That's intense, but I see why it works. And then there's an app called Flow, which uses a psychological concept called body doubling. How does having another person around change the neurochemistry?
Body doubling is remarkably effective. Flow facilitates live, virtual co-working sessions. You log on, you explicitly state your goal to a small group of strangers, and then everyone just works in silence with their cameras on.
That sounds simple, but why does it work so well?
From a neurological standpoint, this provides social accountability without any judgment. But more importantly, it injects a subtle sense of urgency and novelty, two of our NCUP fuels, right into the environment. The mere presence of others observing you creates just enough stimulation to spark the dopamine required to initiate and sustain a task.
So if traditional habit building relies on an internal dopamine loop that is fundamentally broken here, then using these tools isn't just a life hack or a productivity shortcut. Are they essentially acting as prosthetic dopamine for the brain?
That is a brilliant synthesis. Yes, they act as scaffolding for the brain's neurochemistry.
That
They inject enough friction, visible structure, or novelty into the immediate environment to spark the exact chemical cascade required to cross the threshold into action. You aren't curing the brain. You are modifying the environment to match the specific ignition system of the brain you actually have.
Which brings us to a massive pivot. We spent a lot of time breaking down the profound struggles of managing mundane tasks. But what happens when you take this exact same interest-based, high-urgency, nonlinear brain out of the quiet, highly structured cubicle and drop it into the chaotic, high-stakes world of business and entrepreneurship?
It frequently transforms into an immense, almost unfair competitive advantage.
Really?
Yeah. The irony is that the very traits that are pathological in a traditional linear environment are the exact traits required to build an empire from the ground up.
Let's connect those dots, because that's huge. Take impulsivity, for example. In a classroom or a corporate meeting, impulsivity gets you reprimanded. How does that translate into a business advantage?
Well, in entrepreneurship, impulsivity translates into a high tolerance for calculated risk. It's the ability to make rapid decisions with incomplete information, which is an absolute requirement for founders.
And what about distractibility?
Distractibility, which is really just an inability to tune out peripheral stimuli, translates into rapid pattern recognition. The ADHD brain is constantly scanning the horizon. This allows founders to spot market opportunities and lateral connections that laser-focused linear thinkers completely miss.
And I'm guessing hyperactivity plays a role too.
Huge role. It translates into boundless physical and cognitive energy, providing the resilience to work 80-hour weeks on a project as long as it genuinely sparks their passion.
And this isn't just a convenient theory. Our sources highlight some of the most famous billionaires and founders in the world who explicitly credit their ADHD for their massive success. Let's look at Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Group.
Branson is a quintessential example. He has both ADHD and dyslexia, and he struggled immensely in traditional schooling. But in the business world, he leaned entirely into his out-of-the-box thinking and his massive appetite for risk.
How did he manage the day-to-day stuff, though?
Well, because he lacks the executive function to process long, detailed, linear financial reports, he was actually forced to keep his business systems brilliantly simple. He focused his energy entirely on big-picture strategy, brand building, and forming relationships.
The things that provided high interest and novelty.
Exactly.
We also have David Neeleman, the founder of JetBlue Airways, who utilized his wiring in a slightly different way.
Right. Neeleman harnessed the superpower of ADHD hyperfocus to drive deep customer-centric innovation in the airline industry, which was, notoriously stagnant at the time.
But running an airline is intensely operational. How did he handle that?
His success hinged on deep self-awareness regarding his executive function deficits. He explicitly surrounded himself with detail-oriented, highly linear thinkers who could handle the administrative and operational tasks that would have otherwise completely paralyzed him.
The sources also point to Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA, and Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank. Both credited their hyperactivity and their extreme tolerance for risk as the primary engines of their success. The common thread here isn't just that they pushed through their ADHD, it's that they actively built ecosystems around it.
Precisely. They didn't spend their lives trying to force themselves to be good at everything. They utilized the ultimate entrepreneurial strategy for an ADHD brain.
Which is?
They acted as the visionary, the generator of novel ideas, the risk taker, and they partnered with an implementer or a finisher. They literally hired out their missing executive function to someone else.
So the ultimate ADHD workaround isn't just downloading a to-do list app and trying to squeeze yourself into a corporate mold. It's designing a career or building a business where you are compensated strictly for your interest-based superpowers.
Yes.
You let the neurotypical brains manage the spreadsheets, the sequencing, and the timing circuits while you handle the revolution.
You stop trying to force an interest-based nervous system to care about importance, and you leverage your passion and urgency as the most valuable assets in the room.
We have covered incredible ground today. We started by looking under the hood at the brain's missing manager, that prefrontal cortex executive system that struggles to translate knowledge into performance.
We covered a lot, yeah.
We explored the deep exhaustion of task paralysis, time blindness, and the burnout of trying to mask a glitchy switch in an importance-based world. But we also discovered that by externalizing your executive function with prosthetic tools, and more importantly, leaning into your unique, interest-driven wiring, you can unlock incredible, world-changing potential.
And that leads me to a final thought I'd love for you to consider as we wrap up.
Oh, let's hear it.
We've spent a lot of time discussing how individuals with ADHD can adapt to a neurotypical world or build businesses to escape it entirely. But look at the trajectory of the modern digital economy.
It's moving incredibly fast.
Exactly. It is defined by rapid pacing, constant disruption, high stimulation, and the need for continuous lateral innovation. We might actually be moving toward a future where the traditional, linear, importance-based brain is the one at a disadvantage.
Wow.
And the hyperflexible, interest-driven ADHD brain becomes the gold standard for navigating the 21st century.
The world might finally be catching up to the glitchy operating system. Maybe that missing manager isn't missing at all. Maybe they were just waiting to be put in charge of the right company. Thank you for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.